The Rifleman.
In 1992, Hollywood lost one of its last real men. But the world didn't just lose an actor. It lost a legend and a mystery. Chuck Connors, the Rifleman. To millions, he was the face of the honest cowboy, the man who stood tall when the world around him crumbled. But behind that rifle, behind that proud grin, there was another story. A story of ambition, betrayal, and the kind of loneliness that no spotlight can hide. He wasn't born in Hollywood. He came from Brooklyn, a boy named Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors. Born in 1921 to Irish immigrants, raised through the Great Depression with nothing but grit and dreams. His father hauled cargo on the docks. His mother worked long hours just to keep food on the table. And young Chuck, he learned early, no one's coming to save you. You fight your own battles. He was tall, athletic, handsome, the kind of man who didn't need to be told twice what he was capable of. Baseball became his first dream. He'd shout across the diamond, "Chuck it to me." That's how the name stuck, Chuck Connors, a kid from Brooklyn who wanted to make something of himself. By the 1940s, war called, and Chuck answered. He trained soldiers at Fort Knox, teaching tank warfare, discipline, strength.
That's when the brave man chooses, and the coward steps aside.
He was the kind of man who believed in country first, long before it became unpopular to say so. But when the war ended, he came home chasing another dream. Baseball. The Brooklyn Dodgers gave him a shot. For one glorious moment, he stood in the same dugout he'd worshipped as a boy. But life has a funny way of reminding even the toughest men that glory is fleeting. His career fizzled out, and by his late 20s, Chuck was staring at failure again. And that's when fate stepped in. A home run, a ball soaring over a fence in Los Angeles, changed everything. Not because of the hit itself, but because someone was watching. A casting director from MGM saw the 6'5" athlete and thought, that man looks like he was carved out of the American dream. And just like that, Chuck Connors, the failed ball player, became Chuck Connors, the Hollywood actor. His first role was small, but his presence, unforgettable. Spencer Tracy saw it in him right away. Told him, "You've got something, don't lose it." And he didn't. He worked harder than anyone else in that studio. He wasn't born into fame. He earned it. But fame is a strange friend. It builds you up, only to test how far you'll fall. In 1958, The Rifleman hit American screens, and Chuck Connors became a household name overnight. Lucas McCain, the widowed father who raised his son with honor, toughness, and love. It was more than just a role. It was who he wanted to be. Viewers saw the perfect balance of strength and compassion, and the world fell in love. What they didn't know was that behind those scenes, his own family was falling apart. While America watched The Perfect Father on television, his first marriage was quietly collapsing. Fame had brought him everything and taken just as much away. His wife, Elizabeth, had stood by him when he was just another struggling athlete. They had 4 sons together. But as the Rifleman soared, so did the rumors. Affairs, on-set romances, late-night calls that never came home. By 1962, she filed for divorce, saying she couldn't fight the spotlight anymore. Behind the heroic image, Chuck was living a double life. The American dream on camera. The American tragedy off it. Hollywood didn't care. They wanted the image, the tall cowboy with a rifle and a moral compass. But Connors, he wanted something real. After The Rifleman ended in 1963, he tried to escape that shadow. He turned down 8 westerns, desperate to prove he was more than a cowboy. But America didn't want a new Chuck Connors. They wanted Lucas McCain. He was trapped in his own legacy, and so he drifted from one show to another, one woman to the next. Kamala Devi, his second wife, brought passion and chaos into his life. She was exotic, bold, his co-star, and his equal. Their love burned bright, but like most wildfires, it burned out fast. 9 years later, another divorce, another goodbye. Then came Faith Quabius, a woman 33 years younger, full of life, admiration, and danger. They married in secret, against everyone's advice. But old habits die hard. The age gap, the drinking, the temper, it all caught up. By 1980, Faith was gone too, leaving behind whispers of abuse and regret. For the first time, Chuck Connors, the man who always stood tall, started to look tired. But there was another side to him, a side few people ever saw. He wasn't just an actor. He was a man with convictions. When the rest of Hollywood turned against the Vietnam War, Chuck marched in support of the troops. He said, "We're fighting communism there, so we don't have to fight it here." He didn't care who disagreed. In an industry built on masks, he stood his ground, proud, patriotic, and unafraid to be hated. And then came the strangest twist of all. While America debated him, the Soviet Union adored him. Yes, the USSR, America's great rival, loved the Rifleman. Lucas McCain became a symbol of honor and justice for millions behind the Iron Curtain. Even the Soviet leader, Leonid Brezhnev, was a fan. When Brezhnev came to Washington, he asked for only one thing: to meet Chuck Connors. And when Chuck arrived in Moscow soon after, he was greeted like a national hero. Clouds filled the streets. Children waved his picture. The man who once fought communism was now loved by the communists. Life's greatest irony, and Chuck wore it with a quiet smile. By the 1980s, Hollywood had moved on. The golden age of westerns was gone, replaced by explosions and cheap thrills. But Chuck kept working. Horror movies, guest appearances, anything to keep the fire alive. He never begged for attention. He just kept showing up. Then, one day, the body that had carried him through wars, he didn't want pity. He told his friends, "I've lived my life on my terms. I regret nothing." And maybe he didn't. On November 10th, 1992, Chuck Connors took his final breath. The cowboy, who had once stood taller than life itself, finally rode off into the sunset. They buried him in the San Fernando Mission Cemetery, beneath a simple stone. No glitz, no cameras, just silence, and the sound of wind brushing across his name. But his shadow still lingers. The Rifleman still airs on TV. Somewhere, an old man turns on his set and remembers a time when heroes were simple, when right was right, wrong was wrong, and a man could change the world with a rifle in his hand and a heart full of conviction. Chuck Connors wasn't perfect. He was proud, flawed, stubborn, maybe even broken. But in a world of make-believe, he was real. And maybe that's why, even 30 years after his death, people still remember him, not as a saint, not as a star, but as Hollywood's last cowboy.